Hi everyone, it's KnifeFighter22 here. I hope you guys are all well. Welcome to the next opening in the series. Today we're going to be talking about the King's Gambit opening. One of my favourite openings. It's very dynamic and aggressive. This is the position which is called the King's Gambit. And this was a request from Joel Martin. Hi there if you're watching, Joel. To really know how to play the King's Gambit and how to get good results with it. Basically the reason why I think it's such an effective opening as you'll see, you get this position, e4, e5, and so many players, 99% of players maybe, they'll just play knight f3. Hang on, I've got the statistics here. Yes, 132,000 games with knight f3, and I've got 4,000 games with the King's Gambit. So the King's Gambit is definitely takes your opponent out of their comfort zone a lot. If you flip the board over, it looks like you're already putting a lot of pressure on your opponent. You know, it looks pretty difficult for them. So today we're going to be talking about some of the variations. So let's get started. Okay, so the first variation of the King's Gambit, and definitely the most common one, the one you really need to be aware of, is e takes f4. So the King's Gambit accepted. And one of the reasons why your opponent may accept this gambit is because either they don't want to lose their e-pawn, or it's a free pawn in the taking. And you'll notice that from a white perspective, you can't immediately get this pawn back. Now there are two variations you can play here. I'll go through them both, but one of which I'm going to recommend just for people which haven't played the King's Gambit very much. And then the other one I will show you at the end of the video, which you might want to try out once you've started working on the King's Gambit. Okay, so the variation which I'm going to recommend is knight to f3. And the reason why this is so effective is, one, it controls the dark squares as your pawn is controlling the light squares. So you're really controlling all four of these squares in the center already, and you've managed to peel off your opponent's pawn from the center. Also, if you just go back a move, the other reason why you sort of need to play either this move or the other move is because of this queen to h4 check line. And you really don't want this queen h4 check, because it means you have to move your king and you'll lose your castling rights. So you really want to prevent that. And you'll notice that knight to f3, the knight is controlling the h4 square. So this is one of the reasons why your opponent, why this is so effective. It really stops your opponent from making this move really early on. Okay, so one of the things you might see from this position is you might see your opponent getting a bit greedy for material and trying to hold on to this pawn, And the best way that they can do that is by playing their pawn down to g5. So really stopping you from recapturing this pawn anytime soon. But this is great, because what I really love about this is people will play this, but you'll notice that this is very much just diverted to the king's side, and they're going against all the opening principles, which really develop your center pawns and your knights and bishops towards the center, which is not what they're doing. So we will go ahead and contribute to the center with bishop to c4. And you'll notice that this is already a little bit like an Italian opening. So we can always play our knight up to e5 and attack the f7 pawn. This is one of the very common themes in the King's Gambit. And you'll notice also, after we can play our knight up to e5, this queen will be able to come out to the h5 square as well. And also when you castle, your rook will be on the open f-file attacking the f7 square. So this f-file and all these pieces contributing to the attack of the f7 square is a very important factor. Okay, so the most common move you'll see from black in this position is a bishop to g7. And basically what they're doing is they're trying to make good use of what they've done in the game. They've opened up this diagonal, and what they don't want to do, sorry, let's just go back a move, is what they don't want to do is they don't want to let you fianchetto your bishop here, because this rook is going to be pretty trapped. So they're fianchettoing their own bishop first. Unfortunately for them, it does leave a bit of a weakness on the light squares over here, as it opens up the light squares. But now you can just go ahead and play d4, and I think that white really has a very comfortable game, very comfortable center control. Once these pawns start coming down the board, it's going to be very easy for you to win back these with your bishop. There are some fun sacrifices to be played, you know, knight 8, and this is what I talked about, knight e5, get the queen up to h5, castle, get the rook on the f-file. I'm sure you'll have a very comfortable game. And as you can see from the black perspective, I don't think it looks like a very nice position to play, as you're controlling all these squares on the 5th rank. It's going to be very hard for black to develop in a nice, smooth way. Okay, so you might not see that pawn down to g5, and one of the reasons why you might not see black play pawn down to g5 It's just because obviously most people in most typical games castle on the king side, and playing pawn down to g5 really starts to weaken the king side. And if they did this, they could have to castle over on the queen side, and then what we can do as white players is bring all these pawns down to the king side and really harass black when he's castling over there. So you might not see pawn down to d5. You might actually see the other very common move, which is Fischer's recommendation, is pawn up to d6. And basically what this is doing is it's not as aggressive as pawn to d5. I'd say I probably see this more often from the sort of 1200, 1300 players. This is more sort of 1600 stuff. But after d6, then you can play pawn up to d4 again, as we talked about. And after a move like knight f6, knight c3 defending, and black developing with knight c6, I really think that yes, black has a more solid position and a more developed position, but it's really a lot more passive, and you've got a big lead in development. And keep in mind these trumps, which you already have. I mean, you've got this open f-file for your rook after you get castled. Really, all you have to do, because there's no e-pawn, develop your bishop to c4, and then get castled. You probably want this queen up on d3 or e2, get your rooks on the e and the d and the f-files, and yeah, you have a very comfortable game like this. Okay, so not all players will actually go ahead and take the pawn on f4. What you might see a variation called the King's Gambit declined, which is where black is declining the pawn. So you might see something more passive, like pawn up to d6, and then you can just like carry on with this, like knight to f3. But the main thing which you might see, which is a known King's Gambit declined, is pawn up to d5. And this may look a bit strange position. It looks a strange position from both sides, as you can see. But what you want to do is you want to go ahead and capture this pawn here. So you want to go ahead and capture this pawn here, as you do not want to lose this e-pawn yourself. And then what black's probably going to do is he's probably going to go ahead and take your pawn on f4, at which point you can just play knight f3. And then after knight f6, you can play d4 maybe, knight takes, c4, knight b6, bishop takes f4. This isn't one of the most common things you'll see, but it's definitely one of the variations to keep in mind. Knight f3, what else might they play? They might play bishop to c5 maybe, but then you just have d4, and then they have to go back. So I think black's options are a little bit limited here. They could always take the pawn, but then this just leads to knight c3 attacking the queen, and I think you really get a tempo like this. So yeah, I think it does really give white an advantage, the King's Gambit declined, which is why I said you didn't see it as much as you would do. This isn't a very common thing you'll see. Obviously the King's Gambit accepted is a lot more common. I'm just going to go over quickly before I leave the other variation which you might want to try once you've mastered the King's Gambit accepted. Obviously I talked about this queen h4 check line, and you really don't want to bring your king up to e2, because then you can play g6, bishop down to g4, and basically it's a skewer, so after the king moves, the queen is there. And you really don't want your king roaming around the center of the board, especially with this undefended e-pawn. So the other move which you can play to counteract the queen to h4 is you can play a bishop up to c4. And this was actually Fischer's recommendation. And what you can do is, yeah, you'll lose your castling rights, and you'll lose that trump of the open f-file. But what it does is it lures the queen into coming down to h4. So you're luring the queen and coming down to h4, and now you can play your king to f1, which is a much safer square than up to e2. And then after some sort of development, you don't even need to worry about a pawn being defended, because then you can attack the queen, and then after the queen goes back. What I'm saying is you really get a lead in development, but that depends on how confident you are giving up your castle position. Okay, so that was mainly the King's Gambit for you. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. It is a very, very aggressive and very great game to play. And as I said, the main features of this are that not many people know about it. I'd say 90% of people, my rating, when I play them with this, I get the feeling that they're not playing the best moves, or something like this, which is great because you can just go for a great attack, and own them in the middle of the game. Okay, so thanks so much for watching the video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this, Joel. This was for you. I wish you good luck playing chess. Please comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.